The young man had always felt invisible in the small town where he lived. People passed him in the streets without a second glance, thinking of him as just another quiet face in the crowd. He moved through his days unnoticed, yet inside him, there was a fire that few could imagine. Music was his world, his secret escape. From the moment he first pressed a key on an old, dusty piano in his home, he felt a connection that words could never describe. He practiced in secret, sometimes late into the night, letting his fingers dance across the keys while the rest of the world slept. Life had not been easy for him. His family worked hard just to make ends meet, and there was never much money for luxuries like music lessons. But he had a gift, and he had found ways to nurture it on his own. He learned from old books, online tutorials, and by listening to recordings over and over until he could play each song perfectly. The piano was more than an instrument. It was his voice, the way he spoke when no one else seemed to hear him. The town was buzzing with excitement over the upcoming talent show. It was a local event, held every year in the community hall, where everyone came to showcase their skills. Some of the performers were skilled and polished, while others were just looking for a bit of fun. But the young man had a plan. He wanted to step onto that stage and show the world what he could do. It was a big risk because he knew most people would not take him seriously. He could already hear the laughter in his mind, the whispers questioning why someone so quiet would even think of performing. Despite his fears, he signed up. He wrote his name on the list and walked away with a quiet determination. Every step he took was heavy with anticipation, yet his heart was light with hope. He spent the days leading up to the event practicing endlessly, making sure every note would be perfect. He imagined the hall filled with people, some curious, some skeptical, and others who would never expect anything remarkable from him. He wanted to surprise them all. On the day of the show, the hall was already filled with people. Families, friends, and neighbors chatted excitedly, sharing their guesses about who would win and what performances would stand out. The air was thick with energy and laughter. Some performers were children showing off their singing. Others were adults with dances rehearsed to perfection. The young man walked in quietly, carrying a small bag with sheet music he would not need but like to keep as a comfort. His eyes scanned the room, noticing the smiles and the casual dismissiveness of people who had already made up their minds about him. He found a corner to sit and wait for his turn. From there, he could see the stage, the bright lights, and the piano that would soon become the center of his world. He took deep breaths, feeling the tension in his chest, but also the excitement that pulsed through his veins. Every time someone laughed or whispered about another performer, he reminded himself that this was his moment, his chance to be heard. No matter what anyone thought, he would play, and he would let the music speak for him. As the event progressed, the laughter and chatter only grew. Some people found amusement in the performers who were not very skilled, while others clapped politely but without real enthusiasm. The young man observed it all, taking mental notes, learning the rhythm of the crowd. He understood the way attention shifted, how easily people dismissed those who did not immediately impress. He knew he had to capture their attention with something unexpected, something that would make them stop, listen, and truly feel. Finally, his name was called. A ripple of laughter moved through the audience as they recognized who was stepping up. Some people whispered, some smirked, and a few outright chuckled. The young man felt a twinge of nerves, but he pushed it aside. He walked to the stage with steady steps, feeling the eyes on him, sensing the doubt and curiosity mixed together. The piano awaited him, its polished surface gleaming under the lights, and he approached it as if greeting an old friend. He placed his hands on the keys, feeling the coolness under his fingers. The audience continued to chatter and laugh, but he focused on the music, blocking out everything else. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the rhythm of his heartbeat sync with the melodies he had practiced so many times. Then he pressed the first note. It was soft, delicate, almost hesitant, but it carried a subtle promise of what was to come. The laughter began to fade as the audience noticed the precision of his playing. The notes were clear, each one flowing into the next, forming a pattern that was both complex and beautiful. The young man felt a surge of confidence. He could see heads turning, eyes widening, and a few people leaning forward in curiosity. This was the moment he had dreamed of, the moment when his voice, long kept silent, would finally be heard. He continued to play, allowing the music to fill the room. Every chord, every melody, carried emotion, telling a story without words. The audience could no longer dismiss him as just another quiet boy in the corner. They were drawn in, captivated by the depth of feeling in each note. The young man's fingers moved effortlessly, dancing across the keys as if guided by an invisible force, each movement deliberate and expressive. Time seemed to stretch as he played. The room was silent except for the music, the gentle hum of the piano filling every corner. The laughter, the whispers, the casual indifference. All of it vanished. The young man was no longer invisible. He had transformed the space, turning skepticism into awe, doubt into admiration. With each passing moment, he could feel the connection between himself and the audience growing stronger. A silent understanding that music could touch hearts in ways words never could. By the time he finished the first piece, the room was completely still. The young man lifted his hands from the keys, his heart pounding but a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. The audience sat frozen, absorbing the experience, caught off guard by the unexpected brilliance they had just witnessed. No one moved, no one spoke, and for a brief moment, it felt as if the entire world was holding its breath. He looked out at the crowd, sensing the shift in perception. The laughter that had greeted him moments before was gone, replaced by wide-eyed amazement and quiet admiration. People who had doubted him now saw the truth. Talent, dedication, and passion could not be ignored, no matter how quiet or unassuming the person might be. The young man had stepped onto the stage as someone overlooked, but he would leave it as someone unforgettable. As he stepped back from the piano, the first sound of applause began to ripple through the room. It was hesitant at first, but quickly grew, building into a wave of recognition and praise. The young man bowed slightly, feeling a warmth in his chest that was entirely new. This was more than applause. It was validation, acknowledgement of years of effort and belief in himself. For the first time, he realized that being seen and heard was not just a dream. It could become reality, one note at a time. After the first notes echoed through the hall, a quiet curiosity began to spread among the audience. The young man could feel their attention shifting, sensing the change in the atmosphere. The laughter that had once welcomed him had disappeared, replaced by a mix of anticipation and awe. People leaned forward, their eyes fixed on him, as if trying to understand how someone so quiet could create such powerful music. Each note was a small revelation, revealing layers of skill and emotion they had not expected. He continued to play, letting the melodies flow naturally from his fingers. He had practiced countless hours to reach this moment, but now it was about more than practice. It was about expression. Every chord told a story, every gentle trill carried a feeling. His mind drifted into the music, leaving behind the thoughts of the audience or their expectations. He felt connected to something larger, something that made the entire hall fade away except for him and the piano. As he played, he noticed subtle reactions from the people around him. A woman in the front row had her hands clasped tightly, her eyes glistening. A little boy sitting near the edge of the stage was wide-eyed, completely mesmerized. Even those who had laughed at him before were now watching in stunned silence, caught in the grip of the performance. The young man smiled faintly, not out of arrogance but out of quiet satisfaction. He had already begun to win them over, not with words or gestures, but with the music itself. He moved to a section of the song that required both strength and delicacy. His fingers flew across the keys, hitting the right balance between precision and passion. Each note was deliberate, yet it carried a natural flow that made the music seem alive. The audience could almost feel the story he was telling without a single word. Some people closed their eyes, allowing themselves to be completely immersed. The young man, too, felt every note resonate within him, connecting his own emotions to those of the listeners. He thought briefly about all the times he had been overlooked, ignored, and dismissed. Those memories fueled his performance, turning any lingering nervousness into energy. Every person who had ever doubted him, every laugh that had been directed at his quiet nature, had built up to this moment. He realized that the piano was not just an instrument. It was a bridge between him and the world, a way to show people who he really was without needing to speak a word. The music began to shift, moving from gentle melodies to more complex, intricate patterns. His fingers moved with surprising speed, gliding over the keys with control and elegance. The audience could sense the intensity building, the energy in the room rising with every chord. It was as if the young man was telling a story that they could feel more than hear. A story of struggle, hope, and triumph. Every eye in the hall was fixed on him, every ear attuned to the rich harmonies he created. A few people had begun to whisper to each other, unable to hide their amazement. "How can someone so quiet play like that?" one person murmured. Another replied, "I never expected this. He's incredible." The young man didn't hear these words. He was too focused on the music. But he could sense the change, the way the energy in the room was shifting from doubt to admiration. He felt a quiet pride, knowing that his dedication and passion were finally being recognized. He reached a section that required more emotional depth, a part where the melody rose and fell like waves. He let himself feel every note fully, letting the audience share in the emotions he had kept hidden for so long. The silence in the hall was profound, broken only by the sound of the piano. Every person present seemed suspended in time, caught between disbelief and awe. The young man's breathing matched the rhythm of the music, and for a moment, he felt as if he was floating above the stage, entirely free. The performance began to take on a new layer of complexity. He incorporated subtle variations, shifting dynamics, and nuanced rhythms that demanded attention. His hands moved with confidence, yet there was a gentleness to each touch that conveyed sincerity. People began to notice the way he expressed himself through the piano, the emotion behind each chord that spoke louder than words ever could. The young man was no longer just playing. He was communicating, sharing his inner world with everyone in the room. He glanced briefly at the audience, seeing their reactions more clearly now. Eyes wide with astonishment, mouths slightly open, some leaning forward as if they could not get close enough to the music. He saw a few who were on the verge of tears, moved in ways they did not expect. The young man felt a quiet warmth in his chest, a confirmation that his message was reaching them. This was the connection he had longed for, the moment when effort, talent, and emotion converged. The music continued, each note building on the last, creating layers of sound that filled the hall. The young man felt as if he was speaking directly to each person, telling a story of perseverance, hidden strength, and quiet resilience. The laughter that had greeted him was now a distant memory, replaced by reverent silence. Even those who had doubted him were now captivated, unable to look away. The energy in the room had shifted completely. He had transformed skepticism into admiration without uttering a single word. As he approached the end of the piece, he began to slow the tempo slightly, letting the final notes resonate with clarity and emotion. Each sound lingered in the air, giving the audience a chance to absorb the beauty of what they had witnessed. The young man lifted his hands slowly, savoring the silence that followed, the collective holding of breath that spoke louder than applause ever could. He felt a deep sense of accomplishment, knowing that he had reached them in a way that mattered. For the first time, the young man allowed himself to smile fully, feeling the connection with the audience that he had dreamed about for so long. He had come to the stage quietly, expecting doubt and laughter, and he had left a mark that would not be forgotten. The music had done what words could not. It had made him seen, made him heard, and made him impossible to ignore. In the final moments, the audience slowly began to react, some clapping quietly at first, others exchanging glances that said, "Did you expect this?" The young man stood still, letting the moment linger. He did not rush to leave the stage or seek recognition. He had already found something far more valuable, the knowledge that his passion and dedication could touch hearts, change minds, and create a moment that would be remembered. As he stepped away from the piano, He felt a quiet pride in what he had accomplished. The applause began to grow, building from polite claps to enthusiastic cheering. People who had laughed at him earlier were now on their feet, acknowledging the talent and dedication they had once dismissed. The young man took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of acceptance and admiration surrounding him. This was more than applause. It was validation, proof that his music could communicate in ways nothing else could. Even after the audience's reaction settled into a hum of appreciation, he felt the lingering satisfaction of having given everything he had. The young man realized that the true reward was not in recognition or applause alone, but in the experience of expressing himself fully, sharing his gift, and connecting with people in the most profound way. This realization filled him with a sense of purpose, a drive to continue playing, learning, and sharing his music with the world. Part 2 of the evening had ended with a quiet, deep impact. The young man had transformed from a figure of doubt into a source of admiration. He had proven not only to the audience but also to himself that talent and dedication could overcome prejudice, laughter, and skepticism. This was only the beginning of his journey, and as he stepped away from the stage, he felt a renewed determination to continue letting his music speak, to keep telling stories that words could never capture, and to inspire those who might feel unseen in their own lives. As the applause began to settle, the young man remained calm, feeling a quiet energy building inside him. He knew there was more to show, more to express, and the audience's fascination had given him a sense of encouragement he had never experienced before. The initial surprise on their faces had transformed into genuine interest, and now he was ready to take the music further, to create something that would linger in their memories long after the performance ended. He took a moment to close his eyes, letting his fingers hover above the keys. The world around him seemed to blur, and he became completely absorbed in the connection between himself and the piano. This was his sanctuary, a place where he could pour his emotions freely without fear of judgment. Every note he was about to play carried not only technical skill but also his life experiences. Moments of struggle, joy, fear, and hope. He wanted the audience to feel all of that. Even if they could not understand the words, they would understand the emotion. The music started gently at first, each note deliberate and full of meaning. He let the melody grow slowly, layering harmonies that intertwined like threads in a tapestry. The audience was immediately drawn in, leaning forward, holding their breath, captivated by the unexpected depth of his playing. He noticed faces that had been skeptical now showing awe and curiosity. Even those who had chuckled or whispered before were now fully attentive, waiting to see what would happen next. The young man allowed himself to feel every note. He remembered the hours spent practicing in solitude, the times he had doubted himself, and the encouragement he had found in the quiet moments at home with his piano. He drew strength from those memories, letting them fuel his performance. Each chord resonated with emotion, each pause held meaning, and each swift passage spoke of his dedication. The music seemed to speak on his behalf, revealing a story he had never been able to tell in words. As the piece progressed, he began to incorporate faster, more intricate sequences. His fingers moved with precision, but the performance was far from mechanical. Every note was expressive, every pause intentional. The audience was captivated by the skill and passion that seemed to flow effortlessly from him. Whispers of admiration began circulating, though no one wanted to break the spell of silence. They could sense that they were witnessing something extraordinary, a rare talent that transcended simple entertainment. He felt a sense of liberation as the music reached higher intensity. The room seemed to vibrate with the sound, carrying a powerful energy that connected him with every listener. Some people closed their eyes, letting the melody envelop them. Others watched in amazement, unable to look away. The young man felt every heartbeat in the audience, as if their anticipation and wonder fueled his performance. In that moment, he was no longer just a performer. He was a storyteller, and the piano was his voice. He shifted to a part of the piece that required both emotion and technical mastery. His hands flew across the keys, executing difficult passages with precision while maintaining an emotional resonance that made every note feel alive. The audience could sense the intensity and sincerity behind each chord, and the room was filled with a palpable sense of awe. The young man was fully immersed, unaware of the few tears glistening in the eyes of some listeners. Music had a way of reaching places that words could not, and he was witnessing its power firsthand. He thought about all the times people had underestimated him, laughed at his quiet demeanor, or dismissed him as unremarkable. Those memories were no longer painful. They had become fuel. He let them flow through his fingers, channeling them into the performance. Each note carried the weight of years of persistence, and every melody was infused with the quiet triumph of proving oneself. The young man felt empowered, knowing that this music could bridge the gap between doubt and understanding. The audience began to react subtly, their expressions changing from surprise to admiration. A few people whispered to each other, sharing their astonishment in hushed tones. "I can't believe how well he's playing," someone murmured. "He's amazing," another replied. These whispers, though quiet, were a testament to the shift in perception. The young man did not need their approval. The music itself was the validation he sought. Yet, sensing their admiration added a gentle encouragement that pushed him to express even more. He moved into a more lyrical section, allowing the music to breathe and flow with a sense of grace. Each note lingered, giving the audience a chance to absorb the emotions conveyed. The young man felt a connection with each person, imagining the stories and feelings they brought into the room. The piano became a bridge, linking his experiences with theirs, creating a shared moment of human connection that transcended words. He realized that this was the essence of performance, the ability to touch hearts and create an emotional resonance that lingered long after the final note. As the piece progressed, he introduced subtle variations in tempo and dynamics, adding layers of complexity that demonstrated both his skill and emotional depth. The audience was mesmerized, drawn into a world that existed solely within the music. Some leaned closer, captivated by the precision of his hands. Others closed their eyes, lost in the beauty of the melodies. The young man felt a profound satisfaction, knowing that the effort, dedication, and countless hours of practice were finally being realized. In this shared experience, he noticed a few people exchanging glances of astonishment, their previous skepticism replaced by genuine admiration. Even those who had doubted him now seemed to recognize the talent and emotion he conveyed. The young man did not play for recognition, but seeing their reactions added a subtle warmth to his performance. He understood that music had the power to change perceptions, to open hearts, and to create a sense of unity among people who had once dismissed him. The young man transitioned into a more dramatic section, allowing the music to swell and build in intensity. His fingers moved with both speed and grace, executing difficult passages that required focus and control. The hall seemed to pulse with energy, and the audience was completely captivated. Each note was imbued with a sense of purpose, telling a story of perseverance, hidden talent, and quiet resilience. The young man felt the emotional weight of the music, letting it guide him through every phrase and variation. He could sense the collective admiration growing, even if some audience members tried to hide it. The room was filled with a shared sense of wonder, a recognition of the dedication and passion that had brought him to this moment. The young man's focus was entirely on the piano and the story he was telling. He allowed the music to flow freely, unencumbered by self-consciousness or fear, trusting that his skill and emotion would communicate everything he wanted to convey. The melody began to soften, transitioning into a reflective, tender passage. Each note was deliberate, allowing the audience to savor the subtleties of his playing. The young man felt a deep connection to the emotions within him and allowed them to surface through the music. The audience, too, seemed to recognize the depth of feeling, some closing their eyes to fully absorb the experience. The silence in the room was profound, broken only by the resonating sound of the piano. In those moments, the young man felt as if he and the audience were sharing a private, unspoken understanding. As the piece approached its conclusion, he gradually built toward a final, powerful section. The music swelled with intensity, carrying a sense of triumph and fulfillment. His fingers moved with precision and passion, creating a climactic moment that left the audience in awe. The young man felt a surge of pride and satisfaction, knowing that he had conveyed the story he had envisioned. Every emotion, every experience he had poured into the performance was now shared with everyone in the room. The final notes resonated through the hall, lingering in the air and leaving a sense of completion. The young man lifted his hands from the keys, allowing the silence to speak as powerfully as the music itself. The audience remained still for a moment, processing the extraordinary performance they had just witnessed. Their expressions reflected amazement, admiration, and an understanding that they had been part of something remarkable. The young man felt a quiet sense of accomplishment, knowing that he had connected with them in a profound and unforgettable way. The first wave of applause began slowly, polite yet enthusiastic, then grew into a full, heartfelt ovation. The young man bowed slightly, feeling the warmth of recognition and respect from the audience. For a brief moment, the energy in the hall was electric, a shared acknowledgement of the talent and dedication that had been displayed. The young man's journey from obscurity to admiration had reached a powerful milestone, and he felt a renewed sense of purpose and determination. As he stepped back from the piano, he felt the impact of his performance settling over him. The audience continued to clap and cheer, their previous doubts and laughter now replaced with admiration and respect. The young man realized that this was more than a personal achievement. It was a moment that could inspire others to believe in themselves, to pursue their passions despite doubt and skepticism. He felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that he had shared not only his talent but also a piece of his soul through the music. Part 3 of the story ended with a profound sense of connection and transformation. The young man had demonstrated that dedication, passion, and emotional expression could overcome doubt and prejudice. The audience had witnessed not just a performance, but a revelation of hidden talent and resilience. The young man, though still quiet and unassuming in nature, had become impossible to ignore, leaving an impression that would linger long after the final note had faded. The young man had reached the height of his performance, but he knew he could take it further. The audience was completely absorbed, their attention fixed on him as if they were holding their breath. The initial surprise and curiosity had evolved into complete fascination. Now it was time to show them the depth of his talent, the part of him that few had ever seen, the side that had been hidden away behind quiet days and solitary practice. He began a new passage, one that was delicate and emotional, yet carried a hint of power beneath the surface. His fingers glided across the keys with a grace that was mesmerizing. Each note had a story, a piece of his life, and he poured it into the music with every ounce of focus he had. The audience could feel it, the way the music carried emotion, the way it seemed to breathe alive and real. They were silent, leaning in, listening as if the notes themselves were whispering secrets meant only for them. He remembered the nights he had spent practicing alone, when no one else believed in him. He thought about the times he had been ignored, laughed at, or underestimated. All of that had led to this moment. Every practice session, every tear shed over a missed note, every quiet triumph had built the foundation for this performance. Now, those experiences were transformed into music that could touch hearts, and he played with a quiet intensity that made every key speak. The room seemed to vibrate with the energy of his playing. He shifted from soft, melodic lines into more dramatic, expressive chords. The audience felt the shift instantly. There were no longer whispers of disbelief or doubt, only awe. Some people's eyes glistened, and others held their breath, caught up in the story the piano was telling. The young man had become a storyteller, speaking through music instead of words, conveying emotions that no one could have anticipated. As he progressed, he allowed himself to play with even greater freedom. His fingers moved swiftly over the keys, performing complex sequences that required immense skill, but he never lost the emotion behind them. He played with a balance of precision and heart, blending technical mastery with the pure feeling that had always driven him. The audience could sense it. They were witnessing more than just a performance. They were seeing the essence of someone's soul expressed through sound. He moved to a section that was both powerful and vulnerable, alternating between strong, assertive chords and soft, lingering notes. Each shift carried meaning, representing struggle and triumph, fear and hope. The audience was captivated, their attention riveted. Some held their hands to their chests, as if feeling the music physically, while others sat motionless, completely immersed in the experience. The young man felt a deep connection with them, sensing their reactions and letting them guide the flow of his performance. Every note was intentional, every pause deliberate. He could feel the weight of the room's collective energy, and it fueled him. He poured all his emotion into the music, letting every experience, every challenge, every quiet victory be reflected in the melody. The audience responded not with words but with their focus, their astonishment, their growing admiration. They were no longer laughing, no longer doubtful. They were silent, spellbound, unable to look away. He thought briefly about how far he had come. The quiet boy who had been overlooked, who had spent years practicing in solitude, was now commanding the attention of a room full of people who had once doubted him. That thought alone gave him strength, and he let it flow through his fingers. The music became more intense, more intricate, yet remained heartfelt and genuine. It was a delicate balance, one he had mastered through years of practice and persistence. The audience was completely drawn in. Even those who had been the most skeptical now showed expressions of amazement. Some were leaning forward, eyes wide, absorbing every nuance of the performance. Others closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them, carrying them through a journey of emotion and reflection. The young man was aware of them all, but he never lost focus. Every note, every chord, every melody was meant to communicate something true and powerful, and he was determined to give it his all. He transitioned into a more intricate, faster section, demanding both technical precision and expressive control. His hands moved with a fluidity that seemed effortless, yet each note was deliberate and intentional. The audience could see the skill, the discipline, and the passion behind every movement. It was as if the music had taken on a life of its own, flowing naturally yet commanding attention. The young man felt completely absorbed, each moment feeding into the next, building toward a climax that would leave a lasting impression. The music grew in intensity, sweeping through the hall like a powerful current. The young man felt a surge of emotion as he played, channeling years of dedication and hidden talent into every note. The audience was caught in the tide of sound, their emotions pulled along with the ebb and flow of the performance. There was no laughter now, no whispers of doubt. Only the shared experience of witnessing something extraordinary. Each chord, each trill, each carefully placed pause was a testament to his journey, his talent, and his unwavering commitment to his art. As he approached the final moments, the young man slowed slightly, allowing the music to breathe and resonate. Each note lingered, carrying the weight of the story he had been telling. The audience was completely captivated, holding onto the last sounds with rapt attention. He could see the expressions of awe and admiration, the quiet realization that they had underestimated him. He had transformed their laughter into silence, their skepticism into amazement. The last chord was played with a gentle touch, reverberating through the hall. The young man lifted his hands slowly, letting the resonance fade naturally. For a moment, there was complete silence, a collective holding of breath as the audience processed what they had just experienced. Then, gradually, the first sounds of applause began, hesitant at first, then growing steadily. People stood, clapping and cheering, their faces full of admiration and respect. The young man bowed slightly, a quiet smile on his face, feeling the warmth of recognition he had longed for. He stepped back from the piano, letting the audience's energy wash over him. The room was filled with a sense of awe and appreciation, a recognition that went beyond mere clapping. People were whispering to each other, sharing their astonishment at what they had witnessed. The young man felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had not only proven his skill but had also shared a part of himself, his emotions, and his journey with everyone in the room. It was a moment of connection, a shared understanding that transcended words. As he left the stage, he felt a profound sense of accomplishment. The young man knew that this was a turning point, a moment that would remain in his memory and the memories of the audience forever. The applause continued, a testament to the power of music and the impact of genuine talent. He had turned doubt into admiration, laughter into silence, and skepticism into awe. The young man realized that he had done more than perform. He had touched hearts, inspired minds, and left an indelible mark on everyone present. Part 4 of the story concluded with the climax of his performance, a transformative moment for both the young man and the audience. He had reached the pinnacle of his musical expression, leaving the listeners in awe and establishing a connection that would be remembered long after the final note had faded. The young man stepped back from the piano, the echo of the final chord still hanging in the air. The audience sat in stunned silence for a few moments, unable to believe what they had just witnessed. Then, slowly, a ripple of applause began, growing louder with every passing second. It started with a few claps, polite and uncertain, and then swelled into a thunderous wave of appreciation. People were standing now, cheering, some with tears in their eyes, all acknowledging the depth of talent they had just experienced. He felt a mixture of relief and joy, his chest light despite the adrenaline still running through him. He had expected doubt, laughter, and indifference, but instead he had received something far more profound. People who had ignored him or underestimated him were now looking at him with respect and admiration. It was not just the applause that mattered, it was the realization that he had made them feel something they had not anticipated. His music had connected with them in a way words never could. As the applause continued, he allowed himself a quiet smile. He had spent years practicing in solitude, dreaming of this very moment. Yet the reality was even more powerful than he had imagined. For years, the piano had been his companion, his secret world, and now it had become a bridge between him and everyone else. The young man felt a sense of fulfillment unlike anything he had known before, a quiet pride that filled him from head to toe. People were slowly approaching the stage, offering congratulations, shaking his hand, or simply standing in awe. Some spoke words of admiration, unable to contain their amazement. Others nodded quietly, their expressions reflecting deep respect. It was clear that he had left a lasting impression. The young man accepted their praise with humility, nodding and offering a small smile. He knew that this moment was bigger than himself. It was about the power of music to change perceptions, to touch hearts, and to bring people together. A few attendees, who had been the loudest in their laughter or skepticism earlier, now approached him with hesitant smiles, words of genuine admiration on their lips. The young man noticed them, recognizing the shift in their attitude. It was a subtle yet meaningful victory, not just a personal achievement, but a transformation in how others viewed him. The laughter that had once echoed in his mind had been replaced by heartfelt acknowledgement, and it felt more rewarding than any applause could. He walked off the stage slowly, savoring the moment. Each step was deliberate, a quiet acknowledgement of the journey that had led him here. He thought of all the evenings spent practicing alone, the doubts he had faced, and the small victories that had built his confidence. Those experiences had culminated in this performance, and the impact on the audience had made every sacrifice worthwhile. The young man felt a sense of peace, knowing that he had shared his gift with the world in a way that was true and meaningful. Backstage, he found a quiet corner to gather his thoughts. The adrenaline was slowly fading, replaced by a warm, satisfying calm. He reflected on the reactions of the audience, on the astonishment and admiration that had met his performance. It was more than he had ever hoped for. In that moment, he realized that his journey had only just begun. The validation he received tonight was not the end, but a motivation to continue, to keep exploring the depths of his talent, and to inspire others in the process. He thought about the young boy in the audience, whose eyes had widened in wonder, and the woman who had clasped her hands tightly, moved by the music. The thought that his performance had touched them personally filled him with a profound sense of purpose. He realized that music was not just about skill. It was about connection, emotion, and the ability to convey a story that transcends words. That realization would stay with him, shaping not only his future performances but also the way he approached life. The community hall began to empty slowly, the echoes of conversation and applause lingering. People lingered near the stage, reluctant to leave the memory of what they had just witnessed. Some were sharing their amazement with friends, pointing out the extraordinary talent they had underestimated. The young man observed them quietly, feeling a mixture of humility and pride. He understood that tonight had changed something not only for him but also for those who had experienced it. Their perceptions, their expectations, and their appreciation had been transformed. He remembered the moments of doubt before the performance, the fear that people would laugh or dismiss him. Those fears had been real, yet they had been overcome by preparation, determination, and passion. The young man realized that challenges and skepticism were not obstacles but opportunities to demonstrate strength and resilience. His performance had proven that talent, dedication, and authenticity could break through prejudice and indifference. As the last few attendees left, the young man lingered near the piano one final time. He placed his hands lightly on the keys, feeling their familiar coolness. The experience of tonight, the emotions, the reactions, and the connection was something he would carry with him forever. He understood that music had the power to inspire, to heal, and to transform, and he had seen that power firsthand. The quiet boy who had once been overlooked had become someone who could touch hearts and leave a lasting impression. The young man stepped outside into the night, the cool air filling his lungs and clearing his mind. The town seemed different now, not because it had changed, but because he had changed. He had seen that recognition and respect were possible, and that the path he had chosen, the path of dedication and quiet determination, was valid and worthwhile. He walked home slowly, reflecting on the journey, the performance, and the people who had been moved by his music. By the time he reached his small home, the adrenaline had faded completely, replaced by a gentle contentment. He sat at his own piano, feeling the familiar keys beneath his fingers. He began to play softly, not for an audience, not for applause, but for himself. The music was now a celebration, a quiet reflection on the journey he had undertaken and the milestones he had achieved. Each note was a reminder that persistence, passion, and authenticity were powerful forces that could overcome doubt and skepticism. As he played, he thought about the future. He knew that this performance was only the beginning. There would be more opportunities, more stages, and more audiences to connect with. But tonight had been a turning point, a moment that confirmed his talent, his dedication, and his ability to touch lives through music. The young man felt a quiet determination to continue, to grow, and to share his gift with the world, knowing that the impact of music was far greater than any applause or recognition could convey. In the quiet of his room, with the music filling the space, he smiled. He had faced doubt, laughter, and skepticism, and he had emerged triumphant. His music had spoken for him, and it had been heard. The young man knew that the journey ahead would continue to challenge him, but he also knew that he had the courage, skill, and passion to meet it. Tonight had shown him the power of dedication, the importance of perseverance, and the beauty of connecting with others through the universal language of music. The final notes of his private performance lingered in the room, and he let them fade naturally, savoring the peace and satisfaction that followed. The young man had transformed not only the perception of those who had witnessed him, but also his own perception of what was possible. He had discovered that even a quiet, unassuming person could create moments of profound impact, leaving lasting memories and inspiring others in ways that words alone could never achieve. And with that realization, he felt ready to embrace whatever the future held, carrying with him the knowledge that his music could change hearts and lives, one note at a time.